Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast that used to be called the Thrive in 5 podcast, but is now definitely not 5 minutes. So if you have another name idea, please let me know, because I don't think I can keep calling it the Thrive in 5 podcast for much longer, but we're going to stick with that name for now. The podcast that used to be called the Thrive in 5 podcast. In today's episode, I am going to do something a little bit different to episodes that I have done in the past, and quite different episodes I'll probably do in the future. I'm going to be talking a little bit about my own experiences in the corporate world, and essentially the moment I realised I had to walk away from the corporate world and some of those experiences. I'm not going to give you a full LinkedIn breakdown of my career and all my job titles and all that. If you want to look up that stuff, if you're interested, go and check out my LinkedIn profile. It's all on there. You can see exactly what I did. But what I'm going to do today is just run you through kind of my corporate experience, if you like. And I'm going to be really honest that I, until quite recently, really struggled to talk about this. And it makes it sound like it was something incredibly traumatic. And looking back, it was, but it wasn't some big thing that happened. It wasn't some big, awful experience, but a collection of things that over time broke me. There's no other word for it. It broke me. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. To set the scene, I left university with a philosophy degree that was completely pointless and taught me very little apart from how to research and how to reference and how to work independently. That was pretty much what I learned from it. I also learned a lot about drinking and hangover cures and how to get through lectures with no sleep. But that's a whole other story, a whole other reason you go to university. So I left university with my philosophy degree and I joined a big UK bank on their graduate scheme. I actually started in HR. That was my original goal, I guess, was to work in HR. I thought that was a good place to be. I realised quite quickly it wasn't for me and I didn't love HR. I do actually have a professional qualification in HR. That was my professional qualification. I actually have a master's degree in HR and management. That was our professional qualification that we did. So yeah, I have that. But I didn't actually do my grad scheme for very long. I was on the grad scheme for about 15 months and I actually rolled off early and got offered a job. I rolled off early because I got offered a job in our bank's strategy team. I got offered this job. I honestly don't know how I got offered this job because I was in no way qualified to do it. It involved a lot of skills that I did not have. But clearly, I networked a little bit too hard on my graduate scheme. I cheekily emailed a lot of people to ask for meetings and to chat about their careers, and somehow ended up, through a sequence of events, in an interview that I didn't think was an interview, being asked to create a model, and then suddenly I'd been offered this job. It was very, very weird, but I got offered this job, and it was an incredible opportunity. This job, it was the foundation for a lot of what I ended up doing in my corporate career, and it sort of was the passport that got me a lot of the opportunities I had in the future. But as I say, I was in no means qualified to do it. I was 22. My salary doubled overnight when I took this job, and I was so out of my depth. The job was so intense. It involved very long hours. It involved being in the office 5 days a week, sometimes 6. I used to go in at the weekend sometimes. The level of intensity, we were creating strategy decks that would go up to the board in 7-8 hours. It was just bonkers. I had to understand the inner workings of a bank and their financial structures, which I did not. Again, I don't know how I got this job. At the time, I just moved to Leicestershire because my partner's job had moved up to Leicestershire. So I was commuting 2 hours each way and working 12-hour days on top of that, if I was lucky. It was bonkers. It was absolutely bonkers. And I spent a lot of that job, if I'm honest, crying in the toilets. I spent a lot of time having minor panic attacks and just feeling in general completely exhausted, very out of my depth, and like I was going to drown at any moment. The amount of times that I thought, this is it, I can't do it. I just can't do it. And the first thing that taught me, and this isn't really the point of this podcast, but the first thing that taught me is that you can survive a lot more than you think. That doesn't mean it's a good thing. It doesn't mean that what you're going through is good for you, but you are much more resilient than you think. And the fact that I made it through about 18 months that I did in that job tells me that I can get through most things. So I do sometimes go back to that, but I do also look back and think, how the hell did I end up in that position? Because I was well out of my depth. I then, off the back of that job, as I say, that job was a real platform for me to go into other roles. I ended up moving into another couple of jobs that were kind of cross-group project roles. Again, I'm not going to go through the jargon of what I actually did because it's really quite boring, but it was quite a cool job. It was exciting. It involved working with lots of different stakeholders, lots of different people, lots of learning. And it was during that time where the other benefit of that job, by the way, was I had slightly better hours. I was not having to be in the office every day. I could work from home one day a week. I had a bit more flexibility, a bit more control of my diary, and I'd also just bought my house, so I wasn't commuting 2 hours each way, which was an improvement. I was still doing 45 minutes to an hour each way, but it was still an improvement. And it was during this job that I started to really struggle with my health and fitness. I think the toll of the previous 18 months, it all kind of caught up with me, and I lost all ability to go to the gym. When I was in that strategy role, I was going to the gym at the weekends. That just disappeared. I had none of that structure. I was always trying to diet in this job. When I did this cross group role, always trying to diet, always failing, constant. I remember every single Monday it was like, right, I'll start the diet this week, and then by Thursday it would just not happen. And I felt like I was in this place where I just wanted control. I wanted to feel more in control. I felt like the previous, 4 years, like I was on this treadmill work-wise, and I was just trying to get back in control, and I couldn't. And I was using food as a way of doing that. And then off the back of those cross group roles, I landed the job that I was aiming for. This was the job that was my big break, if you like. It was a senior manager role, which in banking basically meant that you were senior. So I stepped up to senior manager, but it was working as a chief of staff. So I was running the office for the managing director of one of our commercial banking businesses. I told you I wasn't going to do LinkedIn jargon, and here we are. Anyway, essentially, whenever I explain chief of staff, some people know what this is, some people don't. So I will explain a very simple explanation of what it was, just so you can kind of get a sense of the sorts of things I was doing. If you ever watch House of Cards, there's the guy who murders the prostitute. That was basically my job. My boss was amazing, never asked me to murder any prostitutes. Basically, I was running her office, making sure that her job ran smoothly, making sure her team were all operating how they should, working with all her stakeholders so that she could go and do the stuff she needed to do. I did all the stuff behind the scenes to make that happen. And it was a great job. My boss was amazing. She was an incredibly cool woman. I just thought she was awesome. She was quite demanding, but I quite liked that. I worked with a brilliant team. The people I worked with were awesome. The kind of leadership team that I was on were amazing. The people underneath as well, within the business, were awesome. All our stakeholders were great. It was a lot of responsibility, managing budgets, organising HR bits, restructures, like all sorts of fun stuff, dealing with lots of performance related things. It's complicated projects to do with balance sheet management. It was absolutely fascinating. I absolutely loved it. It was really, really cool. It was quite high pressured, I'm not going to lie. It was a lot of pressure. It was one of those jobs that involved me running around the office in my heels, coordinating people, grabbing stuff. I was always on the go, always having to be, I've got to pop over to so-and-so to go, and it was just a lot. A lot of things would come in, and I would never know day to day what my day was going to look like. I'd think I had a certain amount of meetings. I'd go in and it would just be crashed by something. The regulator would need something, or we'd suddenly have an urgent request from somebody, and it was just one of those jobs that was a lot of pressure, but also incredibly fun. Really, really fun. But the pressure, I didn't manage the pressure brilliantly, I think it's fair to say. And I began to use food and alcohol a little bit as a means of coping. I was eating my feelings a lot. I got into this really strange habit of going to Pret every lunchtime and buying exactly the same thing. I would always buy the cheese and ham baguette and a bag of crisps and a Love Bar and a bar of chocolate and a pot of fruit because I was being healthy. And I would eat a lot without really thinking about it. And then I would go down to the cafe and get a brownie. And I was just in this cycle of just eating to survive. Food was my means of getting through how busy and stressed I felt. And sometimes I would say I was too busy to eat, but then I'd really think about what I'd eaten, and I wasn't. I was just not really taking care of what I was eating. Eventually, sort of as I got into the job, as things settled down, I found a little bit of balance. I started working with a coach. I lost some weight. I got back into the gym. I found a bit of routine with health and fitness. I was prepping my lunches. I was reheating my lunch in the office microwave, which does make you consider your food choices sometimes. And everything was starting to feel really great. I suddenly got into this groove. I had a couple of months where I was like, this is fab. And then it all fell apart. And this is the point that I can now look back on and go, that was the moment where everything kind of broke apart for me. That's where everything sort of shattered. The illusion of this life I was building kind of crashed around me. The business that I was working in, it was decided that business was going to merge with another business within the bank. And basically my role became a duplicate. My boss was going to lose her job, and therefore, as her chief of staff, I wasn't needed in the new setup because the other manager that was taking on the business had his own chief of staff that he wanted to bring in. And so I was losing my job due to what I've written in my notes as a classic HR cock-up. But now I think about it, this isn't classic because I worked in HR and I ran HR projects. This is not good. No one told me. No one told me that I wouldn't have a job. I knew this restructure was happening. I knew it was going to happen long before everybody else knew because of the nature of my job, but no one communicated to me what my job was going to be. And I was asking questions and it was sort of said, oh, there'll be something for you. And there wasn't. And I had 6 months essentially in limbo where I did not know what I would be doing at the end of that 6 months. I didn't even know if I had a job at the end of that 6 months. There was some complicated HR thing that basically meant that my job wasn't secure. I wasn't in a permanent job. But nobody had told me what I would be doing. No one said if they wanted me to stay. I'd been identified as talent, but no one thought to tell me that I didn't have a job. It was a whole mess, and it was awful. I don't actually think at the time I realised how much pressure it was exerting on me, but looking back now, I can see how horrible it was. I was in a complete spiral, and if I look back at that time now, that 6 months, I was in such a dark place. I was going out a lot. I was drinking a lot. I spent a lot of time at the Ned, which if you work in London, you might know is a sort of members club that one of my friends had a membership to, that I would just be in a lot drinking. I would end up not very well at Bank Tube Station, I think it's fair to say. I would be eating my feelings all the time. My delivery went nuts on McDonald's. I just was in such a spiral because I was so uncertain about what was going to happen to me. In the sort of few months prior to that, I'd lost a lot of weight. I think I lost about 2 stone. I put it all back on and then some. None of my clothes fitted anymore. I had like 3 outfits that I was rotating at work because all the clothes that I'd like got back into didn't fit me anymore. And I just felt broken. I felt completely betrayed, I guess. I don't really know what the feeling was. It's really hard for me to identify it looking back because I was in such a sort of fugue state almost. But that moment changed everything for me. It scarred me, and I can honestly say that it sounds so silly because it was so long ago now. That was what, 2018, 2019, something like that. But it was a horrible experience, and 6 months of that was a really tough thing to have to go to. And also seeing my boss going through a similar thing as well. It was just a really nasty place to be in, a really horrible situation to be in. It was also, though, the wake-up call that I needed. I didn't know I needed it, but it was the wake-up call. I eventually, at the end of that 6 months, I did find another job. I was applying for a bunch of stuff internally. I got offered a role. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I'd hoped to use the job that I was in, that chief of staff role, as a platform to progress my career, and that kind of got ripped away from me. I didn't have that opportunity, so I had to take something else. It wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't the direction I wanted my career to go in, but it was something. I needed a job. I needed to pay my mortgage, so that's what I did. It wasn't the right role, but it was enough for me to start asking myself some questions. It gave me a bit of headspace. It gave me a bit of a break. It gave me the chance to reflect, I guess, on what I wanted to do. That role I took was not the role I wanted to do. I didn't enjoy it. And it made me realise that ultimately I'd put so much energy for so long into my career, and it had taken so much from me. It had taken my health and fitness, how I felt in my body. It had taken all that confidence in my body away from me. It had taken away so much of my life. Like, I spent so much of my life on trains, commuting, and not taking care of myself and just working for somebody else, when it became clear to me that in the context of that organisation, I was a very, very small piece and I didn't really matter. And that's the fact of working for a big organisation. So I wanted to take some time back for me and actually start prioritising myself again to make sure that I was okay. because at that time I still wanted to stay in my corporate career. I hadn't decided to leave yet, but I realised that health and fitness was incredibly important for me to be able to take care of myself and to be a bit selfish, because I felt like I'd spent so long being not treated particularly well, I suppose. So I did that, basically. I started training, I got into the gym, I started working with a different coach who was much better that for me and kind of worked much better for me. I started really working on my relationship with food and not using alcohol as a coping mechanism. I started working on my headspace and my mental well-being, and I put a lot of work into myself, and it helped me to rebuild myself after that experience. It helped me to get stronger and to be physically and mentally in a better spot. And it kind of sparked, getting into health and fitness then sparked a bit of a love of training and of exercise, and I realised how much my coach had helped me and what an impact she'd had on my life, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to help other people do the same thing. So I did the PT qualification. I actually got the bank to pay for my PT qualification through like a learning fund. So they kind of paid their way. They paid me, that was paying me back for the experience that I had. So I went and did my PT qualification, did my nutrition qualification, started my business. That was sort of just as lockdown was starting, and it kind of went from there. The business started, if I'm honest though, as a way for me to escape. I wanted something that was for me. I wanted something that wasn't about working for somebody else. I wanted something that was just me helping people, having an impact, making a difference. I think I felt very powerless during that whole experience. And looking after my own health and fitness gave me a sense of power and a sense of control. And running my own business was like the next step beyond that for me. For years, literally 5 or so years, I wanted nothing to do with the corporate world. I was done. That experience had burnt me so much that I was like, this is not for me. I don't want to spend time in that space anymore. The amount of time people said to me, you should really do something with corporate world. You know, you've got a lot of experience. I was often talking to clients and we were talking about what they were doing at work, and they'd be saying, you know, you should be marketing, that you can talk about this stuff, and you should. And I felt physically unable to enter into that world because it had burnt me so much and it had taken so much from me. But looking back with 6 years or so distance from that particular experience, and I've been out of the corporate world now completely for 2.5 years. That particular experience was about 6 years ago. Looking back on it now, I can see that avoidance came from fear. It came from that feeling that I didn't want to go back to that place. It also came from a bit of imposter syndrome, like, I was burnt, so therefore I shouldn't be working on this stuff. You know, it came from a place of, fear and imposter syndrome. But in some ways that was really selfish of me, because I have something to offer here. I have something to talk about. I believe I had such a great time in my corporate career, and I'm really sad that the things that happened to me in that experience happened to me, and I'm really annoyed at myself in some ways that I let those things dictate how I showed up or kind of change how I view that career. Because actually I had a great time and I'm so proud of what I achieved, and there were some really cool projects I was involved in and some things that had a real impact on the way the bank ran, which I know is not that exciting, but also on the world. I did a really cool homelessness project when I was in one cross group role that genuinely I'm so proud of to this day. It was one of the best things I ever did. I have something to offer now. Now I have some space from the corporate world and I have some distance. You know, I've lived that world. I get it. I know what it's like to work in those sorts of jobs. I know what it's like to work jobs that take a lot away from you. But I also know that when you do prioritize your health and fitness, and I know that if I had prioritized my health and fitness more and had somebody in my corner, someone like me, showing me how to take care of myself, particularly through that horrible 6 months, but also through other experiences and just other parts of progressing in my corporate life, it would have looked very different for me. Life would have looked incredibly different, and I would have had more longevity in that, and I wouldn't be doing this now if it hadn't happened. So, you know, in many ways, I wouldn't change a thing. But I know now that I have skill set, I have experience, I have knowledge, I have perspective to help women in the corporate world. Women like I was. The ones who are sitting at their desks at 8 p.m, knackered, wondering if this is just how their life is going to be. Those who are sat on the train feeling completely awful. Those who are feeling a little bit let down by work or feeling like it is taking away something from them and their ability to enjoy their lives. And that's what I'm here to do now, right? I'm here to talk to that woman, to support her, to help her, to show her that there is a different way. I don't want anyone to have to do what I did and leave the corporate world completely, because I think it's so powerful. And I'm now super excited to be getting back into this space, to be working with organizations, because it's so important. And the corporate world, with a few tweaks, can be a great place to work and be a place that really makes a difference for people. I'm here to help women, to help anybody, but particularly professional women, to live a different way, to show there is another way to living that doesn't involve burning yourself out, that doesn't involve losing yourself in the process, that doesn't involve becoming a victim of your job, of your career. Something that I've been reflecting on recently is maybe I didn't leave the corporate world to escape it. Maybe I left so I can come back stronger on my own terms and have a different impact. That's what I'm hoping anyway. If you are listening to this being like, oh, I recognise bits of myself in that, I'm in a role that's draining me, I'm not feeling so good, I'm feeling a little bit let down or unsupported, or like my work's not helping me, I see you and I know what it's like, and I know how horrible it is. But you're not failing, you're not weak, you are a human being trying to survive, and you deserve more. And the truth is, you don't need to burn out to do something differently. You don't need to overhaul your entire life, but you might need to do some things differently. I didn't realise how bad it had got until it was too late, and until I was really scarred by it. But you don't have to wait for that moment. You can do something now. You can do something about it now. I hope you found that episode useful. Thank you for listening. If this resonated, please do share it with somebody who you think would find it useful. Drop a like on the video if you're watching on YouTube. It makes a massive difference. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And you can always message me. Drop me a DM on Instagram, on LinkedIn. I don't think you can message on YouTube, but drop me a comment on YouTube if you want to reach out. But please do reach out and say hi. If you've got any questions or anything that particularly resonated, I always love to chat. I will catch you next time. Have a good one.